Today, we're focusing on a very significant report regarding the need for every woman leaving prison to have a safe home. There is a shocking statistic that up to 6 in 10 women released from prison are condemned to homelessness with just £46 and a plastic bag. Nowhere to live, the threat of recall if they miss a probation appointment. This puts vulnerable women at risk and makes it almost impossible for them to achieve rehabilitation.
And I want to explain a little bit more about why the way we respond to the needs of vulnerable women leaving prison must be changed urgently. At present, as you've already heard, thousands of women are released from prison with little more than a discharge grant and a plastic bag and nowhere safe to go. Many have poor mental health, have suffered from domestic abuse and trauma, sometimes since infancy. And without safe and secure homes, their chances of regular employment, resuming the care and custody of dependent children, continuing essential mental and physical health treatment, let alone completing rehabilitation, are not only difficult, but very, very unlikely. About 65% of the prisoners released from prison to no fixed abode reoffend. Women are often given very short sentences for non-violent offences and leave prison without suitable accommodation. When they do so, they are seldom visible as rough sleepers on the streets of London or elsewhere. Why? Because faced with danger, they're at risk of returning to previously violent or criminal partners, sofa surfing, exchanging sex for a bed for the night, and resume reoffending behaviour, addiction, before returning to prison. Now, I believe that every vulnerable woman who is returned to prison soon after being released should be identified as evidence that our criminal justice and penal system has failed. Some of these women have told me that the last time they had a safe bed for the night was when they were last in prison.
From my experience, what's happened is, obviously, I am now diagnosed ADHD. I wasn't, and it took me to fight with my support workers in the community, in my safe, secure housing, to be able to get that diagnosis that I've been trying to get for 37 years. I wouldn't have been able to do that. I can quite categorically say that if it wasn't for that safe space or that home, that I wouldn't be sat here now in front of you all today sharing my experiences, because I would have ended up gravitating back to the culture that I've come from. I would have got back into the same circles, and I would have ended up back where I'd started before all the great work that I'd done in prison. So the problem that we have is there's no continuation from great work in prison out into the community. When we say wraparound support, it's in relation to everything from medication that you know, even entering prison, your medication gets stopped, so you're to go a bit kooky whilst you're in there at first, because you're not on the same medication you were as you were in the community. They don't prescribe some of the same medications that you put necessarily on in the community. When you're coming out, you only get given a few days worth from the prison pharmacy, let's say, to keep you going for a bit. Now, myself and my situation, I had to relocate. In order for me to maintain my recovery and rehabilitate to who I am now, I had to relocate and start completely fresh away from everything I've ever known. I didn't have a doctor's, didn't know where to go to the doctors, didn't even know the area, I didn't even know what part of the country where the prison was. So it's that continual support that isn't there. That's what the need is. There isn't that. There's people like Rebecca and people like Rock Solid that provide that support when we come out. And I like someone said, I am one of the minority and the very, very fortunate few that is quite articulate and quite motivated, and I know what I want and I know what direction I'm going in. 98% of people aren't like that. So they need that support and they need that continual wraparound encouragement and empowerment to be able to maintain what they've got going and get the links within the community that they're going into.
We see so many women who are released with only £46 in their pockets into circumstances that will result in homeless, recall, relapse onto substances, or other situations which will cause harm to their safety, their ability to move forward, not to reoffend or go back to prison, and sometimes cost them their lives. For example, it's often common practice for a woman to be released in the morning with the expectation that they are to attend probation in Birmingham or Derby in the afternoon, which straight away setting them up to fail, because if that appointment gets missed, they get recalled. So the current supported living that is provided to women, because there are services out there, it fails to be safe and it fails to be secure, and it often doesn't offer the wraparound support that is needed. So the current supported living comes in two main forms. You have a probation hostel or you have exempt housing. So from the experience of what our women have shared with us, the environment of a probation hostel is one where women still feel like they're being treated as prisoners, with little or no support given to help them start a new life and move on with their rehabilitation. Our women feel that this system again is setting them up to fail and ending recall. The other form of accommodation that is really kind of popular is the exempt housing. And it is the main support offered to both men and women who leave prison. These are unmonitored, therefore they're unsafe. Our staff have escorted women to some properties that have been unisex and not fit to live in due to damp, mould and other issues which do put our women in vulnerable situations. Women can find themselves sharing an accommodation with drug users that's not monitored because there's not staff there. And again, there's no wraparound support being offered.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for inviting me to this, and I'm quite new in post, and so you have to aim off a little bit, but certainly one of the things that I think is self-evident is that if we do want to allow people to rehabilitate, that means ensuring that we sweep away a lot of the barriers to that rehabilitation. And people ultimately, it seems to me, have limited bandwidth, and you're going to take up a lot of bandwidth if you are focusing on where you're going to sleep. And I absolutely recognize that. You have to prioritize that, particularly if you are coming out of a custodial context.
And I think it's really important, the bandwidth of how much a woman has to navigate. And I'm going to go back to the woman that came out of prison on Friday afternoon. It's now Tuesday. So she's been out back in the community for 3 days. And in that time, she's had to find where her kind of drug support is to get her script. She's had to find a chemist where she can get the script from. She's going to have to find where her doctor's is. She's going to have to set up an email. She didn't even have an email address when she came out of prison. She's also going to have to then navigate universal credit. In the first 3 days of her freedom, if it hadn't have been for our support, and she said it would have been impossible because it just overwhelmed her. And luckily for her, that main important thing was already sorted out. She's got a safe space to sleep.
That's absolutely the point. That's what I meant by bandwidth, and you made that point extremely powerfully. You, as you say, that feeling of being overwhelmed. So that's why we want to get the foundation blocks in place so people can deal with all the other things they need to begin their path back to a better life for them and indeed the community they live in.
6 asks to roll out the new temporary accommodation pilot for prison leavers across all probation areas in England and Wales, to ensure that this pilot contains specific measures to address and support the particular and complex needs of vulnerable women prison leavers. Ensure women are supported to find long-term, safe and secure accommodation beyond that 12 weeks temporary accommodation, which will be provided by this pilot. Appoint new designated prison officers acting as brokers for housing in every women's prison, and ensure these officers receive specific training on the challenges facing women prison leavers. And then review the effectiveness of the duty to refer in the Homelessness Reduction Act with respect to vulnerable women leaving prison. Unashamedly focusing on the very particular needs of women in all of this.